Hi friends, it's Grace and welcome back to another video. Today I'm going to be doing an update on a video that I did last year. I think it was last year, where I talked about standalone SFF recommendations because a lot of this genre is dominated by series, and while I love and adore series, sometimes it is just really nice to read a standalone book knowing that when you go into it you are going to get the story, hopefully love it, and then put it away knowing that you're finished with it and you don't need to either wait for the next book or have the commitment of knowing that you have a long road ahead of you. So I have 8 books on this list, all of which I have read this year in 2022, and I'm going to first start with the 2 of them that I do not have physical copies of. I read both of these on ebooks, actually as ARCs from NetGalley, and I basically just want to talk about them first so that I don't forget, because when I'm physically looking at my pile, they're not there. So these are very different from each other in tone, but they're both relatively short fiction. And the first one that I'm gonna go with is What Moves the Dead by T. Kingfisher. And I do have a dedicated review for this novella on my channel, so I will link that in the description if you're interested. But What Moves the Dead is a retelling of the old short story The Fall of the House of Usher by Edgar Allan Poe. And that short story is only about like 15 to 20 pages long, depending on the edition of it that you have, and it's pretty widely available in my experience at the library and stuff like that, so I would definitely recommend reading the short story if you haven't. But essentially What Moves the Dead follows our main character when they are called back to, like, a friend sends them a letter expressing her need for them, and they go back to this house where the Ushers live. It's the house of Usher, and their friend is ill, and essentially they are going to try and help out, but mysterious things start happening in the house, and the people who live there seem to be like affected by the house, and there's something in the water type of deal. And What Moves the Dead is definitely a horror story, but it's not like super scary or horrific. I would categorize it more as unsettling, and it definitely captures the surreal, like unreality vibe of the original short story, and it really like, it adds a modern spin a little bit on the story, but it also adds like a little bit more resolution, and a really cool resolution in my opinion, and it's a really easy read. It's super short because it's not a full-length novel, and I thought that it was really good. Then next up, like I said, these 2 are very different from each other in tone. That is The Very Secret Society of Irregular Witches by Sangu Mandana, and this is essentially a very sweet story of like a fully grown witch named Mika, and someone reaches out to her after seeing videos of her on the internet and asks her to come train 3 young female witches that are living together in this house. And Mika has been basically brought up on the concept that the only way for witches to protect each other and themselves is to have very little contact with their own kind, and to like religiously and very tightly hold their secrets. And so she is fascinated and shocked by the fact that there could be 3 young witches in the same place. And so the story kind of like unravels from there, but it's kind of a really like heartfelt found family type of story. In a way, it very much gave me House in the Cerulean Sea vibes, but I think I liked the way those aspects were done better in this one. Like, not to say that I liked the children better, because they're very cute and like individualistic in both books, but I really liked the personalities and the coming together of not only Mika with the witches, but with the other adults in these young girls' lives. And it's really about like learning to love and support and to actually form connections with other people when you're so used to not letting anyone know you. So it was really a joy to read, and it is also quite a quick read, so I would definitely recommend that. Then next up we have a book that has a little bit of a similar vibe in terms of the wholesome like found family aspect, and that is Legends and Lattes by Travis Baldry, which is now officially out in its traditionally published format because I've seen it in Indigo, but this is the self-published paperback that I got earlier this year. And so Legends and Lattes is the story of our main character, who is an orc named Vivian, and she has lived, or well, actually her name is Viv. I don't know if her full name's Vivian. I guess I just assumed that. But she has lived life as a barbarian with like her team doing jobs and stuff, but she wants to get out of that life. So she decides to settle in a city and open a coffee shop, basically in a country full of people who have never heard of coffee. She's trying to break the mold and trying to introduce coffee to this land, and she meets like friends along the way, and it is like a slight romance story, maybe more than slight, but the focus is more on the friendships and the found family aspect and how like Viv builds her new life. And it is very wholesome, even though there is some conflict with the underbelly of the existing city, but I just found this also to be a joy to read. Then next up we have a historical fantasy horror novella, and that is Ring Shout by P. Djeli Clark. And so this was featured in my vlog of books you can read in a day, and actually another book on this list was featured there as well, so I will link that video. But this is essentially the story of 3 women or girls, they're young women, who are monster hunters in the South, in this era where KKK members can become actual monsters, and they're called Ku Kluxes. And so it's basically the concept that the KKK members' souls are so distorted and blackened that they can actually become like non-human monsters, and these like main characters are part of an organization where they hunt and kill these monsters. But there's also another monster that is arising and is also like kind of in league with who they usually hunt, and this is just a really, really cool concept. I will say that there's some body horror in here. I didn't find it too gratuitous, but from what I remember, I would definitely keep that in mind going into it. But this is also a novella, like it's quite short, and I was just in awe of how P. Djeli Clark managed to establish his like authorial voice and also his character voices and personalities so distinctly and memorably in such a short piece of fiction. And I really liked the like plotting and culmination of the like plot and issues that arise during this story. And like I was emotionally connected very early, and that is very important to me, especially with something so short like this, because there's less opportunity before the ending when you're supposed to be feeling the impact of the ending. And so I think that I did, because he did such a great job with the characters and with the plot. So again, a really short, easy read. I would 100% recommend this. Now, the other book that was also featured in my books that you can read in a day vlog was Pier and Essie by Susanna Clark. And I have said many a time, and I will continue to say, I think it's important to go into this book not knowing a lot, but the basic concept is that our main character, Pier and Essie, lives in this like cavernous location that almost feels like something out of Greek mythology. There are massive halls and statues, and he basically subsists by providing for himself by like fishing, and he writes in a journal to recount his days. And there is one other person that he sees in the location where he lives. And so they have a bit of a relationship, but a lot of it is shrouded in mystery because you don't really know a lot about this house where Pier and Essie lives, but you start to learn about it with him, and it's a really, really fascinating book. I still think about it. I loved the way that everything came together and the reveals, and this is one that I would love to reread. I didn't think at the time that I finished it right away that it was a favorite, but I think that with its lasting impact on me, it definitely is. Okay, next up we have a book that I only just finished a few days ago for Once Upon a Readathon, which is happening this month as we speak in November, and that is Spinning Silver by Naomi Novik. And this is a very, like, for me, very reminiscent of the Winternight trilogy by Catherine Arden. This is a very fairy tale-esque, wintry vibes, atmospheric retelling of like various kind of general Russian mythology stories. And this is like, it does feel like a fairy tale. And so in this story, we have our one main character, Miriam, who is the daughter of a moneylender, and she realizes that when her father can't properly run the business, she kind of takes it over herself. And then you have another main character who's one of the families indebted to Miriam's family, and she is the daughter of this family, and so she goes to work for Miriam's family, and they kind of form a relationship. And then you have another main character perspective of a duke's daughter, and so I won't say how they all end up intertwining because I don't want to spoil anything, but essentially you have the human realm, and then you also have this realm of beings called the Steric, and they are essentially like the domain of winter, and so they will sometimes come raiding from the forests and steal gold or like kill animals from the human realm, and they will always look for gold. And so Miriam has an encounter with one of them where she is tasked with turning silver into gold for them. And if she can prove this magical ability, then her fate might be sort of changed and intertwined with the Steric. And so this, honestly, this is a very intricately plotted book, and I thought that it could have been a duology, but it is a standalone. And the plot was very compelling. I had a few pacing issues with this, and I would also warn readers going in that there are at least 5 perspectives in here, and they are all in first person with not too much warning when you're switching perspectives. So that's just something to be aware of. It didn't detract too much from my enjoyment, but I think that some of the choices made with perspectives kept me from like fully loving this. But just the plotting and the characters themselves and the magic and how everything came together, I thought was really fascinating and like really well done in this book. So I would still 100% recommend it, especially if you like the Winternight trilogy. Maybe not so much in plot, although there are some like similarities or resemblances, but mostly just in the vibes and the like Russian mythological ideas and the wintry atmosphere. I think that this would be a great choice. Then next up we have another mythological retelling, and that is Cersei by Madeline Miller. And this is another book that I read while I had COVID in May, and so this was something that I basically just sat down and read through it, and I was not, like, I was compelled the whole way through. I wasn't bored. Like, it's the type of book where when I had nothing to do, I was completely enthralled by it. And so that was a very positive thing to say about it, because it staved off my boredom and allowed me to isolate in my room for like at least 1 or 2 of the 5 or 6 days or whatever it was. But this is a very stunning retelling of the story of Cersei, and so this goes through basically from the start of Cersei's life all the way through, and it touches on some popular myths, but like in my opinion this is very much bringing to the forefront one of the lesser talked about, or at least lesser well-regarded figures of Greek mythology. And I was really fascinated, and I loved what she managed to do with this character, and I loved like her prose and her way of telling the story. And ultimately, I think this is a really like feminist story, not in anything that it like necessarily intentionally or overtly tries to do, but just inherently what it is, a story of a witch who is negatively regarded by like many of her peers and can't gain the favor of her father, who once she's banished manages to like stand alone, and we get to see her achievements through the stories that she's involved in, and we get to see some like romance, we get to see how her story touches other well-known stories, and yeah, I just think that this was really, really phenomenal. And if you like mythological retellings, this is one of the more popular ones, to be fair, but definitely one that you should not miss out on. Then last but not least, and a book that I have talked about quite a bit in recent videos, is Fable by R.F. Kuang, which was an August 2022 release, so once again, pretty recent. This is a standalone fantasy about historical Britain, and it's a reimagining of the basically the colonialist times. I say as if we're not in those anymore, but this imagines that Great Britain had the power of silverworking at its back, and this, like, Fable is the Oxford Department of Translation. And so this magic of silverworking all rests on the back of translation and being able to translate words from one language to another. Our main characters are taken from their homelands at a young age and brought to Britain so that they can learn and be like the perfect student candidates for Oxford, because they can speak their native languages and they can also speak English, and so they would be a credit and a strength to the translation department. But there's inevitable themes of colonialism and revolution and the relations between the East and the West, and namely like the issue of opium in China and Britain's role in some of that. And there are strong themes. The themes are the strongest part of this book. And unlike some of the others where they're very short, quick reads, this is definitely a more hefty one, but it still is pretty easy to read. And I would point you towards my dedicated review for this book on the channel if you're interested in hearing more. But if what you've heard so far interests you, I would recommend checking this out. So those are the 8 books that I wanted to talk about in this standalone SFF book recommendations video, and so that is it for this one. These are all books that I really, really enjoyed or loved, and I hope that you liked this video. Let me know down in the comments what you think of this list, or if you have any standalone recommendations for me based on what I've enjoyed. I would really appreciate it. Please like this video if you liked it. Subscribe if you'd like to see more content from me. I post new videos every Monday and Thursday. And as always, I'll have my Discord, socials, and Patreon linked in the description below if you're interested in any of that stuff. And with that said, that is it for this one. I will see you in the next one, and I hope that you have a fantastic rest of your day. Bye!